Good morning and welcome to Radio Friends on Wednesday, October 31st. Today is Halloween, so happy Halloween to you. And if the little ghosts and goblins are going to be out tonight, we want to make sure that adults are with them. They're not out in the street by themselves, and they're wearing reflective gear. We talked about that earlier. Larry Brown is with us. Good to have you here, Larry.
Good morning.
And I assume that you have a Halloween story for us?
Ghost story.
A ghost story. All right, so without any further chatting, I'll introduce Larry Brown, singer-songwriter, today's storyteller, with a ghost story for Halloween.
Laura and her boyfriend became fascinated with the programs they were doing down at the Missouri State Prison to take people on a ghost tour. Well, it was Laura that was interested. Now, there was historical tours, and they do those, but they would take you through the prison and tell you all the stories of the inmates and the ghosts left over. Laura had to do it. And when they did it that evening, as they were in building number A, passing by cell number 19, Laura heard a name, Laura. She turned, thought it was Robert, but he was some distance away. As she turned back and looked at cell 19, she saw that bit of a glow, the shining, and it took shape. And there she saw at least the upper torso of an older man in bib overalls and a straw hat. Laura! And then it disappeared. Well, she reported it to the tour guide, as they always did, and said, well, we've never seen anything or heard anything in cell 19, but we'll jot it down. But Laura was convinced she'd had an encounter. Well, they booked themselves, even at Robert's hesitancy, to go on one of the all-night ghost hunting events. And so she camped out right there at cell 19. And sure enough, somewhere in the middle of the night, she heard her voice, Laura. And she stood and turned and looked into the cell, and there she saw the full shape of an older man, bib overalls, straw hat, reaching through the cell toward her, going, Laura. And then he was gone. Well, they went home and began to process what was going on. She said, he was reaching out to me, calling my name. And then in a few nights, she had a dream. And in the dream, she saw this man coming toward her across the field. Well, when she awoke, she explained the dream to Robert. Robert says, now that's not what they told us about ghosts. They're residual. They are left over in the stones of places. They don't come anywhere else. But she said, no, it was like he was here. And sure enough, in a few days, even in the daytime, she thought she saw him coming through the yard. Another day, coming across the back of their house. They had to find out what was going on, did their historic research. And as they dug into the history of the prison, they indeed found a man by the name of Walter Everett. And in the 1930s, he'd been convicted of murder and sentenced to life in the state prison. And there was the name Laura connected. He'd been a young farmer and had been engaged to a neighbor girl, Laura, but thought he needed to work the farm to make enough money before they could get married. One day, Laura had brought lunch to him. He'd gotten off the old tractor. They'd had lunch together, and she returned. He went back to work. Little did he know that as she had left the field and in a patch of woods, had been bitten by a rattlesnake and had called out, but it was too late. By the time that Walter had left the field in the evening, she was dead. Walter could not get over that. He grieved and was depressed. He worked for another local farmer for a while, and one day he just drove into that farmyard and walked to the barn, got a rope, and was going to hang himself, but he couldn't do it. As he was coming out of the barn carrying the rope with a noose, his employer, Arthur Medford, and his friends were sitting up on the porch and began to make fun. Couldn't do it, Walter, huh? Couldn't do it. Walter stood there. Arthur reached down and threw a handful of bullets and said, well, try a gun. Walter picked up those bullets and threw them back up toward the porch. Then Arthur threw a pitchfork and an axe. He says, well, try something. You can do something. Walter walked back toward his truck, but instead of driving off, he started driving at high speeds toward the porch. Arthur up on the porch reached down, got a shotgun, blasted out some of the windshield. The pickup stopped, and Walter stepped out then, pulling his own rifle out, aimed and shot and killed Arthur. Well, the sheriff was there soon, and the trial had proceeded, but because the sheriff knew the Medford family and the only folks to testify were friends of Arthur, it probably wasn't a fair case. He could have pleaded insanity, but he was in prison for life. It was after World War II that the church farm had been set up, a place where inmates could go out and do farm work, and Well, Arthur was selected to do that, and indeed he did well for a while, but again became overwhelmed with depression, would stand out on the field and look off into the distance. And finally, they had to take him back to the prison because he wasn't working out in the farm. And it wasn't long after that that he'd managed to fashion a noose out of his clothing and hung himself in cell 19. Well, when Laura and Robert unpacked that whole story, Laura knew what she needed to do: confront that ghost. Well, once again they went. Robert was saying, no, you don't have to do it. Laura said, he needs to see me. He needs to encounter me, so I will challenge him. And so again they booked themselves on the ghost tour, and she went to cell 19, and sure enough, sometime in that evening, Arthur appeared. At first that glowing, that shining, and then he took full form. And she saw him step out from the cell, reaching toward her. Laura stood still, calm, trying to think to herself, it's okay, it's okay. Robert was watching nearby, and he said for a moment it was as if they both disappeared. And then Laura slumped to the floor in a faint. When she awoke, she was calm. She was okay. She said, it's all right. Walter found his Laura. And as far as anyone has noted, Walter was not experienced again. Laura had no more encounters. At least it was believed he finally was at peace, for he had found his Laura. And perhaps you could venture back there and maybe see if he's around, as long as your name's not
Laura. Laura. That's a good story. Is that a true story?
It's a story based on encounters that people have experienced in the old Missouri State Prison.
Yeah, I'm sure there are many stories like that go back. Yeah, yeah. And the story was a lot longer, and you had to condense it for this.
Sure,
but thank you so much, Larry. That's a good Halloween story. If people want to hear your stories in person, do you have any appearances coming up in this area?
Well, I will be over at Lourdes doing Family Literacy Night on November 2nd. I'll be part of
You'll be where?
Lourdes.
Our Lady of Lourdes?
Yes, Our Lady of Lourdes.
Okay, Our Lady of Lourdes Catholic Church.
For Family Literacy Night.
And that is when?
November 2nd.
Okay.
That evening. I'll be at the Kansas City Storytelling Celebration November 8 and 9. And I'll be over at Gladstone doing a celebration at 16, a little farther away.
How can they get in touch with you?
brownstory@hotmail.com.
Okay, and your DVDs and CDs are available there also. Larry Brown, thank you so much. Tomorrow, League of Women Voters and Columbia Weavers and Spinners Holiday Exhibition and Sale. Our program directed by Travis McMillen, Reynolds Journalism Institute. Audio, Pat Akers, KBIA. Our floor director, Danny Matteson. And our assistant producer and guest coordinator, Uncle James Mauser. And to watch this program or listen to it again, go to kbia.org, click on Talk Shows and Radio Friend. Bye-bye.